Okay, let's get into this. Buckle up, because today we're diving deep into a story that, honestly, it feels like it was made for TV.
And in a way, it absolutely
Right.
was.
We are talking about Todd Chrisley. You probably know him, that sort of larger-than-life dad from Chrisley Knows Best.
Mm-hmm.
You saw the show, right? The big house, the fancy clothes, this apparently perfect Southern family, lots of witty lines, navigating
The
fame.
whole package, presented very neatly.
But the material we've looked at,
Yeah.
it tells a much more complicated story. There's wealth, yeah,
Mm.
but also aspiration, family stuff, and, well, serious federal charges.
It's true. What the sources lay out here, it goes way beyond just, celebrity gossip.
Yeah,
Todd Chrisley's journey, as it's documented in this material, it really hits on bigger themes. Things like image. How important is the image? Totally in
absolutely.
the American dream, maybe the TV version, versus the real experience. And, of course, the consequences when, reality doesn't quite match up with that curated life.
Absolutely. So we've got this pile of articles, research notes, and our mission today, really, is to explore Todd Chrisley's path.
Let's do it.
We're going to trace it all, from his beginnings in real estate, through the whole reality show craziness, the family dynamics, which were uh,
Definitely complex.
all the way to the legal drama, the unraveling, and where things stand now according to these sources. Think of this as us exploring the material with you, figuring out the key points together.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Before the cameras, before Chrisley Knows Best. Who was Todd Chrisley?
Right.
The material we have says Michael Todd Chrisley, born Georgia, 1969. Grew up in South Carolina. Doesn't exactly scream Hollywood star right out of the gate.
No, not really. But the sources do emphasize this real drive he had, even early on, like
Mhm.
a hunger for success.
Yeah, and he apparently found his first real avenue in real estate,
That's right.
focusing on foreclosed properties, building up what he claimed anyway was a multi-million-dollar portfolio, mostly through a company called Chrisley Asset Management.
And that's where the foundation of that wealthy image was laid.
Exactly.
And the material really paints a picture of that image being super important, right, from the early days.
Yeah.
You know, the flashy cars, the huge houses, projecting this whole self-made millionaire vibe.
Hmm.
One source actually called it living the Instagram version of the American dream, but like way before Instagram was even a thing.
Which makes total sense because that image, that whole performance essentially became the pitch for Chrisley Knows Best.
Yeah.
The show hits in 2014, puts Todd and the family right in the spotlight, and it leans heavily on that extravagant lifestyle and Todd's very unique parenting style, very involved.
Oh, and the one-liners. You got to mention those.
Absolutely.
There's no such thing as privacy in the Chrisley household. That became like his catchphrase, didn't
It
it?
did. And the show worked. People watched this seemingly perfect, rich Southern family dealing with life with humor and, let's be honest, pretty over-the-top situations.
It clearly struck a chord.
The sources point out it was this blend, right? Reality, but also comedy. Almost like a sitcom feel, but with a Southern accent.
Yeah.
But they also note how polished it all seemed. Maybe a little too perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And that, according to the material we've seen, that's where the real tension started to build. Was this lifestyle actually sustainable? How did it square with these rumors that were starting to float around about financial problems?
That gap, right, between the shiny TV version
Mhm.
and the whispers off screen,
Yep.
that became a huge part of the story, even pretty early on.
Yeah.
The show wasn't just like documenting their life. It felt like it was showcasing a performance. And the sources suggest those cracks, well, they eventually got harder to paper over.
And speaking of complexity, the material also really digs into the Chrisley family itself. You have Todd and his wife Julie, of course. She's often described as like the calm center to his energy.
Yeah, one source called her the calm to Todd storm.
Mm.
You know, smart, graceful, and they have Chase, Savannah, and Grayson together.
Right. But the sources also make a point of highlighting Todd's older kids from his first marriage, Lindsay and Kyle.
Oh, yeah.
And those relationships are described consistently as complicated.
Complicated might be putting it mildly, based on what the material lays out.
Seems like it.
Kyle, apparently, he struggled with substance abuse, had a really public spat with Todd early in the show's run.
Right.
And Lindsay, well, after she left the show, she later came forward with some pretty serious accusations against Todd, alleging things like extortion attempts.
Yeah, those family issues maybe glossed over a bit on TV. They definitely played out very publicly behind the scenes, added whole other layers to this story that you weren't getting from the show itself.
So, okay, We have this carefully built world, this image. When did it really start to, dramatically fall apart? The material seems to point to August 2019, and that feels like a key date.
That's the one. That's when Todd and Julie Chrisley were hit with a federal indictment from a grand jury.
And the charges were hefty.
Oh, yeah. Extensive, really serious stuff. Accusations covering tax evasion, wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, the works.
And the details in the material, they're quite specific, aren't they? Prosecutors basically claimed that Chrisley's ran this scheme to defraud banks, like handing over false financial documents to get millions in loans.
And at the same time, they were accused of deliberately hiding income from the IRS, dodging taxes, even while, living this incredibly lavish lifestyle that everyone saw on TV.
Right. Now, Todd Chrisley's reaction, publicly anyway, as the sources note, he denied everything. Vehemently.
Absolutely. Claimed it was all a setup, blamed it on a disgruntled former employee out for revenge. That was his story.
But the material, it makes it pretty clear that the evidence eventually brought forward told a very different story.
Yeah. Emails, financial records, witness testimony. The sources describe it as building a damning case.
Yeah.
And what really stands out reading through the material is how the prosecution presented it. This wasn't framed as, honest mistakes or bad bookkeeping.
Right.
It was painted as deliberate, calculated fraud. The sources really detail that argument.
Okay, so fast forward then. June 2022. The trial starts. Yeah. Huge media attention, obviously.
As you'd expect. And after, several weeks of arguments, evidence from both sides, the verdict came in.
And the material is pretty blunt about it.
Unequivocal, yeah. Guilty on all counts, both Todd and Julie. Convicted of conspiracy to commit bank fraud, tax fraud, other related charges too.
Wow. And then sentencing. November 2022, that must have been intense.
The sentences were significant. Todd got 12 years in federal prison. Julie got 7 years.
12 and 7, that's substantial time.
It is. They reported to federal facilities in January 2023. Todd went to a camp down in Florida, Julie to one in Kentucky.
And the sources really mark that moment, don't they? As the definitive point where that whole on-screen Chrisley world built on wealth and perfection
came crashing down, as one source puts it quite starkly.
Yeah. The material also talks about the impact on the kids, particularly Savannah.
Right. Savannah, already kind of a public figure herself, she really stepped up. Took custody of her younger brother, Grayson, and also their niece, Chloe.
That's a lot to take on.
Huge responsibility. And she's been pretty open about it all, on her podcast, social media, giving a perspective on what the family's going through post-conviction.
And the family, based on the sources, they still maintain their parents are innocent.
They do. They continue to say Todd and Julie were wrongly convicted and are actively working on the appeals process.
Right.
And public opinion, as the material details, it's still pretty split. You've got people who see it as, justice served for financial crimes, white-collar crime finally being punished. Then you have others who feel the sentences were maybe too harsh or that maybe they were targeted because of their fame. It raises interesting questions about how that TV persona interacts with the legal reality.
Okay, so let's step back a bit. Looking at everything the sources lay out from that early ambition, building the image, the reality TV fame, those complex family relationships, and then the huge fall, what does it all kind of tell us about the bigger picture?
Well, what's really fascinating, I think, is how Todd Chrisley's story, as it's presented in this material, it works as this powerful example of, the pressure. In American culture, sure, but maybe amplified by reality TV and social media.
Yeah.
This pressure to not just be successful, but to project this image of effortless, perfect success all the time.
And the sources paint him as a master of that, right up until the whole thing just couldn't sustain itself anymore.
Exactly. He built this public identity around, family values, perfection, but the material reveals this other layer underneath. Alleged financial manipulation, serious legal trouble.
So it really becomes a kind of cautionary tale then.
I think it functions that way, yeah. What happens when the public performance gets so disconnected from what's really going on, and the severe consequences when that gap is maybe inevitably exposed?
Okay, so drawing from the latest info we have in the sources, where is Todd Chrisley right now?
He's currently serving his sentence. He's at Federal Prison Camp Pensacola, down in Florida.
Okay.
And the material includes some reports suggesting, it's a much quieter life now, following the prison routine. Some sources even mention he's reportedly found a sort of unexpected peace in that simpler structure compared to the chaos before.
Wow. Quite an arc the sources trace then. From ambitious real estate guy to this huge reality TV star
Right.
projecting total wealth and control
Yeah.
to facing this intense legal fight and ultimately ending up in prison.
This deep dive, just going through the material, it's taken us through all those key points, hasn't it? His origins, the whole Chrisley Knows best phenomenon, the tangled family stuff, that federal indictment that blew it all
Right?
open,
The trial, convictions, everything.
and where the sources say he is today. Yeah.
And what's just undeniably clear from all the information we've looked at is that stark contrast
Mm-hmm.
between that super polished, curated reality we saw on screen
Mm-hmm.
and the really challenging, legally fraught reality that was apparently going on underneath it all.
The material really does illustrate the significant cost, financially, personally, of trying to keep up what might have been a false image and the severe consequences that came when the legal system brought that underlying truth out, that theme, curated reality versus actual truth. It just runs through his entire story.
So looking back at everything this material has shown us about Todd Chrisley's journey,
Mm-hmm.
what does it make you think about? It definitely gets you thinking about, celebrity culture, that intense pressure to seem perfect and successful, and the complex, often hidden stuff going on behind these public faces.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe this leads to a final kind of provocative thought for you listening to mull over based on this whole narrative in the material, this mix of huge ambition, this really elaborate performance, the alleged financial schemes, and then the legal reckoning. What does this story tell us, maybe fundamentally, about how we perceive reality now? Especially in this age of reality TV everywhere, constant social media. And what are the potential dangers, the pitfalls of building your whole identity just on how things look from the outside? Something to chew on long after we finish talking.